Hello everyone. Welcome to Dead Time Stories. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's story. Clara Rios hadn't meant to fall asleep. Not on the couch, and certainly not with the television still murmuring static from an unfinished nature documentary. Her eyes fluttered open in the blue light of the screen, her body sore from sleeping in a crooked position. The worn leather cushion creaked under her as she sat up, rubbing her temples. It was past midnight. The window showed no movement beyond the glass, just the shadow of the fire escape and a slice of moon. She was about to shut off the TV when she heard it, a soft thump from the front door. Not loud, not forceful, just the kind of sound that nudges into your awareness like an afterthought. It wasn't the knock of someone trying to visit, and it wasn't the clatter of the heating pipes. Clara sat still, listening. Nothing. Then another sound, softer this time. A dry, almost papery sound, like a single sheet being dragged across the floor. She rose slowly, goosebumps prickling her arms as she crossed the room. The apartment was small, one large room that served as both bedroom and living area, plus a kitchenette and a tiny bathroom tucked in the corner. She reached the door and flipped on the hallway light. There it was. A single piece of paper lay just inside the threshold, perfectly square with the crack beneath the door. She hesitated. Then, cautiously, she bent down and picked it up. The paper was aged, yellowed and brittle, with tiny tears along its edge. The kind of parchment you might find in an old library or a forgotten box in the attic. But it was the handwriting that caught her breath. Dark ink, neat and deliberate, pressed deep into the page as if the writer had carved it in. If you've found this, you've already heard it. Do not open the wardrobe. It does not like the light. Clara read the words twice. Then again. Her skin crawled. What the hell? She turned toward the corner of her apartment. There, looming in the shadows, stood the old wardrobe, an ugly, towering thing made of dark oak and ornate brass handles, left behind by the previous tenant. She'd always thought it was a little too large for the room. Tonight it looked larger. She stared at it. It did not move, but something in her mind whispered that it was waiting. Clara didn't move at first. She stood with the letter clutched in her hand, the inked warning echoing like thunder in the silence of her apartment. Do not open the wardrobe. The wardrobe had always unsettled her, even before the letter. It dominated the corner like an oversized coffin with ornamental trim. There was something old about it, not antique, but ancient, as though it predated the building around it. Though it always felt slightly too cold. The brass handles never gleamed, no matter how many times she tried to polish them. She set the letter on the kitchen counter and grabbed her phone. No service. Not unusual for this side of the building, but tonight it felt intentional, like the air had thickened just enough to stop the signal from getting out. She turned back to the wardrobe. Okay, she whispered to herself. It's just furniture. She approached it with slow steps, trying to feel brave, but every part of her body was tense with unease. The floor creaked under her foot, once, then again. Her reflection followed in the tall mirror affixed to the wardrobe's left door, and for a breathless second, she thought she saw it blink. Clara froze. The mirror showed her wide, frightened eyes, her messy sleep-matted hair, her tank top wrinkled from the couch. But no blinking. Just her. She exhaled shakily. Then the kitchen light flickered once, twice, and went out. Oh, come on, she muttered, stepping back. She tried the lamp near her bed. Nothing. The hallway switch. Nothing. The apartment had gone utterly dark, save for the pale glow of the moonlight filtering through the curtain and that faint shimmer of glass in the wardrobe mirror. She stood in the quiet, her own breathing suddenly too loud. The city outside felt impossibly far away, the usual hum of life beyond her walls entirely absent. Then, knock knock. Clara gasped. Not at the door. Not above or below, but from inside the wardrobe. A low, solid tapping, two deliberate, hollow knocks. She backed away quickly, bumping into the coffee table and nearly stumbling. The wardrobe stood silent again, unmoving. Her heart hammered. And then came a new sound, worse than the knock, a slow scrape, like long fingernails dragging across wood, from inside. She backed toward the window, her fingers fumbling for her phone again, even though she knew the signal wouldn't return. The air grew colder. Then, from behind the wardrobe doors, she heard something soft. A sound like breathing, raspy, low, wet, almost human. Clara stood rooted in place, every instinct screaming at her to leave the apartment. But where would she go? Her keys were on the kitchen counter. The front door was just a few steps away, unlocked, if she remembered right. Yet something told her that opening the door, stepping into the hallway, wouldn't guarantee safety. In fact, it might be worse. The scrape inside the wardrobe had stopped, but the breathing hadn't. Low, wheezing, damp, like lungs filled with soil. "Is someone in there?" she said, instantly regretting the question. She hadn't meant to speak aloud. Her voice sounded too human, too real in the charged silence of the room. For a moment, nothing answered. Then, 3 knocks. Slower, harder, closer. Her legs moved before she realized it. She backed into the couch, grabbed her coat, yanked her keys from the counter. The letter fluttered to the floor. She reached the door. Just as her fingers brushed the knob, a metallic rattle behind her. She turned and saw it. The wardrobe handles, thick brass twisted into the shape of vines, were trembling. Not violently, not loud, but moving. Clink, clink. They shook like something inside was testing them, trying to decide whether it should be patient or not. "I didn't open it," Clara said, more to herself than to whatever was listening. "I didn't open anything." But the letter had said, "If you've found this, you've already heard it." So this had happened before. Someone else had lived here. Someone had heard the knock. Someone had written the warning, and had vanished before they could explain more. Maybe they had opened it. Maybe they hadn't. The wardrobe stilled again. But the silence now was worse than any noise. It was a watching silence. A hungry one. She gripped the doorknob, then froze again. Her eyes darted to the floor, to the thin sliver of space beneath the wardrobe doors. It was supposed to be dark under there. Shadowed. Hidden. But now there was a faint glow leaking out. A deep orange-red light. Faint, pulsing. Moving. It reminded her, horrifyingly, of breathing. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply turned, twisted the knob, and fled into the hallway barefoot, coat half-zipped, heart racing. The hallway light flickered above her. And just before she closed the door, she heard a voice from inside the apartment. Faint. Dry. Smiling. "We see you now." The door clicked shut behind Clara with a finality that seemed to suck the air out of the corridor. Her breath came in bursts, the cold metal of her keys biting into her palm. She leaned against the door, chest heaving, as if the weight of what she just heard was pressing against her ribs. The hallway stretched long and narrow, lit by flickering sconces that hadn't been updated in years. She had always thought the vintage lighting gave the building character. Now, it made the walls seem to breathe. Shadows twitched with each flicker. Her neighbor's door, 2B, remained closed, the same crooked wreath hanging on it from Christmas, now yellowed and dry. She raised a shaking hand and knocked. "Mrs. Lee?" she called out softly. "Are you awake?" No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. "Please, something weird is going on. Can I just..." Click. The peephole cover slid shut from inside. Clara stared. She hadn't heard footsteps, hadn't seen the eye. Just the quiet, deliberate click of metal as the tiny lens went dark. She took a step back. Fine. She'd go downstairs. Sleep in her car. Call someone once the signal came back. She turned toward the stairwell, then stopped. The door was open. Wide. She was sure she hadn't heard it creak or swing. It had simply changed between blinks, like something had rearranged reality slightly while she wasn't looking. The stairwell itself looked normal at first glance. Dim, silent. But when she stepped closer, she noticed something odd. The shadows on the wall didn't match the ones in the hallway. They moved slightly, and not in rhythm with the flickering light. One of them, broad-shouldered, had tilted too far to one side. Wasn't hers. Clara stepped back quickly, breath catching. "Not real," she whispered. "Just my nerves." But the shadow tilted its head further, as though amused. And in the silence of the hallway, Clara heard a soft, dragging sound rising from the stairs. Something was coming up. Deliberate. Slow. Unseen. She didn't wait to find out what it was. Clara turned, ran back to her apartment, and stopped short. Her door was open, only an inch, but it had been closed. Hadn't it? She reached for the handle with trembling fingers. It creaked as it opened wider, the air inside colder than before. And from the shadowed interior, where the wardrobe waited in the corner, a faint voice whispered again. "You brought us out." Clara stood frozen in the doorway, staring into the darkness of her apartment. It felt colder now, far colder than it had any right to be in July. The air was dense, thick with the scent of something ancient. Not rot exactly, but age. Like dry earth, wood smoke, and time itself had seeped into the walls. Inside, all was still. The wardrobe sat where she'd left it, but something was different. Its shape felt off. Wider? No, deeper. It seemed to pull the light toward it, swallowing the moonglow that had once filled the room. She whispered, "Hello?" No answer. Only the faint ticking of the wall clock and the soft shusher of her blood in her ears. "I didn't open anything," she muttered. "I didn't do anything." But the voice had said, "You brought us out." Us. She closed the door slowly behind her, then turned on her phone's flashlight. The narrow beam cut through the dark like a knife. She swept it across the room, bed, table, sink, and then the wardrobe. The handles were still, but the surface of the wood shifted, barely perceptible, like a shimmer beneath the varnish, something just under the surface breathing. The light caught movement, a thin line crawling. No writing. She stepped closer, trying to see it. On the left door, a message was being etched in real time, the wood groaning faintly as invisible claws carved each stroke. "Do not look inside." Clara gasped and dropped her phone. The light skittered across the floor, and for a heartbeat, the room went dark again. When she picked it up, the message had stopped mid-sentence, the final word unfinished. The scratching sound resumed. She stepped back. "No," she said loud now. "No, I'm not playing this game." She grabbed a blanket, a change of clothes, and her wallet, stuffing them into her backpack. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped the charger twice before shoving it in two. She slung the bag over her shoulder, made for the door. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it wasn't coming from inside the wardrobe. It was from the mirror mounted on its left door. She stared. Her reflection was still, but its eyes were no longer hers. Clara stood frozen, staring into the mirror. Her reflection stared back, but wrong. Subtly, horrifically wrong. The face was hers, same cheekbones, same messy hair, same wide brown eyes. But those eyes blinked out of sync with her own. They blinked after she did. She lifted a hand. The reflection hesitated, then followed. It smiled. Clara didn't. Her mouth stayed shut, trembling. The reflection's grin widened, slow, deliberate, almost pitying. It looked at her like a mother watching a child struggle to understand something far beyond their reach. She reached behind her and grabbed the kitchen towel from the counter. Without taking her eyes off the mirror, she flung it at the surface. The towel struck with a dull smack and slid to the floor. Her reflection never flinched. She stepped closer, phone's flashlight trembling in her hand. "What are you?" she whispered. The mouth in the mirror moved again, but not in time with hers. It formed the words, but soundlessly. "You let me see." Clara staggered back. "No, no, I didn't open anything. I didn't look inside." Her reflection blinked. This time, Clara didn't. And yet the thing in the mirror knew her. It wore her. Then, just behind her doppelganger's shoulder in the glass, a second figure came into view. Clara whirled. Nothing. But in the mirror, a tall, narrow silhouette. Thin arms, too long for its frame. No face. Just a blurring of features where eyes and mouth should be, like a charcoal drawing smudged by a careless hand. It stood beside her reflection, watching, waiting. "We only needed your eyes," the mirror version mouthed, lips moving with patient finality. Clara grabbed a heavy cast iron candle holder from the shelf. Without thinking, she hurled it at the mirror. Crash. Glass shattered in an explosion of jagged fragments, shards scattering across the wood floor like dead leaves in a storm. She shielded her face. The phone clattered to the ground, lights spinning wildly across the room. When she dared to look again, the wardrobe was open. Just a crack. Barely noticeable. But open. A deep, unlit gap, no wider than a hand's width, stood between the doors. And from within came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Soft. Slow. Crossing the distance. Clara took a shaky step back. The footsteps were faint, but not imagined. She knew the difference now. They echoed softly from within the wardrobe, like someone pacing a space much larger than the interior should allow. A space that went on, and down. She stared at the crack between the doors. No light shone from inside this time. It was pure darkness. Dense. Complete. The kind of black that absorbs sound. Her phone's flashlight beam couldn't pierce it. The footsteps stopped. She didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until the pressure in her chest made her dizzy. Then came a new sound, scraping. Not fingernails now, metal. Like something dragging a blade across the wood floor. Clara whispered, "No, no, no." And then, the wardrobe door creaked open another inch. Just one. Enough to let in a gust of cold air that smelled of damp soil and burnt paper. It filled her nostrils and made her eyes water. She clutched her phone tighter, fumbling backward, bumping into the coffee table. Her foot landed on a shard of the broken mirror. Sharp pain shot through her heel. She hissed and limped back toward the door, blood smearing on the hardwood beneath her. "Run," her mind screamed. But her body refused. It was as if the air around her had turned thick, gluey, and she was sinking into it. Another inch. The door opened again. Clara's eyes widened. She could see something inside now. Not clearly, just the suggestion of a figure. Long limbs, hunched posture. A gleam of something pale against the dark. The shape was wrong. The proportions too thin. Its head tilted, slow and curious, like a dog listening for a distant sound. "I see you," a voice rasped from inside. Not loud. Not angry. Just certain. Then came the sound that unglued her completely. A second set of footsteps. Not from the wardrobe. From behind her. She turned. Nothing there. But the blood trail she'd left on the floor? It had vanished. She spun back toward the wardrobe and found it wide open, every inch revealed. But there was no one inside. Only a staircase, descending into pitch black. The staircase inside the wardrobe defied logic. Clara gaped at it, trembling, her bleeding foot forgotten. The space that had once held a tangle of sweaters and thrift store shoes now plunged downward. Deep, narrow steps carved from what looked like blackened stone. Each stair was damp, glistening in the faint glow of her phone's flashlight. Moss crept along the edges. And the smell. It was ancient. Wet clay. Burning hair. Rusted iron. Memory. She backed away, but the air behind her was wrong now, thicker, as if the apartment itself had rearranged. Her body resisted retreat like the hallway behind her no longer wanted her to leave. And the voice. Still there, whispering faintly from below. too soft to decipher, too insistent to ignore. It wasn't calling her by name, yet, but somehow it knew her. It hummed just beneath language. Familiar. Like something from a forgotten dream. She aimed the flashlight into the dark and called out. "Who's down there?" No answer. Only the sound of dripping water and shifting stone. She should have closed the doors. Nailed them shut. Run screaming down the hallway. But something in her bones, some distant, ancient instinct, told her it was already too late. She'd already looked. She stepped closer to the wardrobe again, holding her breath. Inside the doorframe, just above the first step, was a faint inscription, barely visible in the wood. She leaned in, tilting her light. The last tenant did not return. She blinked. Her throat clenched. Tenant? That word, it felt like a warning and a title. A role. A placeholder. The last tenant. She touched the carved letters, and the wood felt warm beneath her fingertips, like skin. A sudden rush of air pushed up from the stairwell, almost like a breath. Then came a new sound, unmistakable. A child's laughter. High-pitched, distant, giddy, and behind it, a second voice. Low, guttural, not human, whispering in reply. Clara staggered back. And then she saw it, just for a moment, at the base of the stairs. A child's face. Grinning, eyes black from lid to lid, and standing behind the child. Something much taller, hunched, its limbs bent at impossible angles. Both vanished in an instant. But not before Clara heard it again. That same soft, certain voice. "You're next." Clara backed away from the wardrobe until her spine hit the far wall. She was shaking, her phone's flashlight jittering across the warped shadows like a wounded firefly. The staircase inside remained open, gaping, a throat leading into some underground lung where light went to die. Her heart thudded like fists against a locked door. She could still smell the stairwell's breath, damp stone, burning dust, something sweet and rotting like old fruit. But more than that, she felt it. A pull. Not physical, not magnetic. Personal. Whatever lived in that stairwell knew her. Knew she was alone. Knew she'd look. She turned to run. But the floor under her bare foot was slick, her own blood still warm. She fell hard, her elbows slamming into the ground, phone skidding under the coffee table. Darkness swallowed the room. Clara scrambled blindly, heart pounding, breath catching in her throat. Her fingers closed around the phone again, and she clicked the flashlight back on. The beam landed, accidentally, on the inside of the wardrobe door. More writing had appeared. Names. Dozens. No, hundreds. All carved into the wood. Some small and delicate. Others gouged in with desperate force. The oldest were barely legible, worn smooth by time. The newest. She saw her name. Clara Rios. Fresh. The grooves were still shedding tiny curls of wood. She screamed and slammed the door. The other slammed with it. Silence fell. But she could still hear the laughter. From inside. And the whisper, shifting now, growing clearer. "You're not the first. You won't be the last. But you will be different." Clara stood up slowly, limping toward the bathroom, blood oozing between her toes. She needed to think. To breathe. But most of all, she needed to get out of the apartment. The hallway. The building. Whatever had been stirred by her presence, it was awake now. Watching. As she passed the broken mirror shards, she caught a glimpse of her reflection again. But it wasn't following her. It was still facing the wardrobe. Smiling. And waving. Clara reached the front door, her injured foot leaving sticky, crescent-shaped prints along the hardwood. Her fingers trembled as they found the deadbolt. Click. Clack. Slide. Unlocked. She grasped the doorknob, twisted, and yanked it open with every intention of running down the hall, screaming if she had to. But the hallway was gone. Where there had once been the long corridor of Unit 2, lined with faded carpeting and tired light sconces, there was now only blackness. Not the darkness of night. Not shadow. Absence. A complete void, as if the building had been erased, gutted clean. Clara reached her arm out into it, but the darkness was solid. Her fingers pressed against something there and not there, like warm fog wrapped in muscle. Her breath caught. She closed the door slowly, unwilling to turn her back on that impossible emptiness. "Okay," she whispered, chest heaving. "Okay. You're dreaming. You hit your head. You're bleeding. You're hallucinating." She pressed her back to the door, slid down, and sat on the floor, hugging her knees. But then the door knocked. Once. From the inside. She bolted up. Whirled. The knock came again, 3 times, gentle as fingertips. Not behind her anymore. Behind the wardrobe. She turned toward the monolith in the corner. Its doors were closed again. The mirror, now cracked in 1,000 lines, no longer reflected anything but broken shapes. Her eyes caught movement in the reflection. A figure, tall and slim, standing in the kitchen. She spun. No one. But when she turned back to the mirror, the figure was closer. She gasped and fell backward. The phone slipped from her hand again and hit the floor with a clack. Its flashlight beam rolled across the room and landed on something she hadn't noticed before. The closet door, just to the right of the wardrobe. It was ajar. Only an inch. But something inside it breathed. And then, a voice came from behind the door. Not from the wardrobe this time. Not from the mirror. From the closet. A dry whisper, unmistakably human. "We weren't all taken. Some of us stayed behind." Clara stared at the half-open closet door. Her lungs refused to work properly. Each breath came in tight, rapid gasps, as if the air had thickened in her throat. The voice had sounded close, too close. Like someone was pressed right up against the inside of the door, lips brushing the wood as they spoke. "Some of us stayed behind." She took one cautious step toward it, each movement calculated, limbs trembling. "Who's there?" she asked. "Who are you?" Silence. Then, scratch, scratch, scratch. Fingernails on wood, slow and deliberate. Clara reached for her phone, snatched it from the floor, and pointed the flashlight toward the crack. Nothing. Just darkness and a thin sliver of her hanging coat swaying slightly, as though disturbed. She should have left it. Should have backed away. But something in the voice, something human, compelled her. She gripped the edge of the door and pulled it open slowly. Empty. Just the usual mess: umbrella, broom, a shoebox of receipts, her raincoat sagging on its hanger. No one inside. No blood. No shadows with faces. But on the interior wall of the closet, behind the coats, someone had scrawled a message in charcoal. Or was it ash? Her flashlight traced the words. "Don't trust the mirror. It takes first." She stared. Her throat tightened. Her reflection, its smile, the way it had moved without her, came rushing back with razor clarity. Clara slammed the closet door shut and backed away, pulse rising. She looked around the room. Every corner seemed deeper now. The apartment's angles had warped somehow, longer, tighter, unfamiliar. Then the floor beneath her groaned. Not creaked. Groaned. As though the wood itself resented her weight. Something is wrong with this place, she thought. Very wrong. But hadn't it always been? She remembered when she first toured the apartment. How the landlord, Mr. Salazar, had glanced quickly at the wardrobe and said, "That thing was here when the building was bought. Just don't mess with it." She hadn't thought much of it at the time. She needed a place. It was cheap. Quiet. Now she realized why. No one wanted to stay here. No one could. From the wardrobe, she heard the faintest sound. A child's voice again, softer now. Singing. Out of tune. Something like a lullaby. The voice was faint, drifting like smoke from behind the wardrobe doors. Clara stood still, her heart pounding in rhythm with the tune. It was a lullaby, but not one she recognized. The melody curled into itself, off-key and slow, like a child humming a song remembered wrong. Sleep, sleep deep below, where no one wakes and no winds blow. The words were muffled, as if sung through fabric, or from beneath the floorboards. Clara clutched her phone tighter. The beam of light trembled across the room, catching in the cracks of the broken mirror, glinting on the wardrobe's brass handles. They no longer trembled. They waited. The song continued, still in that child's voice, haunting, sweet, and hopeless. Eyes are closed but still they see. If you look too long, you'll cease to be. She clamped her hands over her ears. Stop. Please stop. But it didn't. Not until she screamed. Stop! Silence fell. Then a soft creak behind her. She turned. The closet door was open again. Wider this time. Her raincoat had fallen from its hook and lay in a heap on the floor, as if something had brushed it aside. The shoebox of receipts was overturned, its contents scattered like dry leaves. On the closet wall, beneath the first scrawled warning, a new message had appeared. Still written in black. Still fresh. But different handwriting now, shaky. Desperate. We're not dead. We're just forgotten. Clara backed away, breath catching in her throat. Then the apartment shifted. She felt it, something subtle, like a long exhale. The walls groaned, and the ceiling above her gave a dry, crumbling sigh. The air pressed tighter. She turned toward the kitchen, and froze. There was a figure standing there. Still. Motionless. A man in a bathrobe, barefoot, face half in shadow. He looked familiar. Mr. Salazar? She whispered. He blinked slowly. His eyes were black pits. His mouth opened, but no words came. Only that same lullaby, now whistled. And when she stepped closer, he crumbled. Like ash. Falling apart in a breeze that didn't exist. Clara stared, frozen in disbelief, as the ashes of Mr. Salazar drifted through the air like burnt paper scraps. They swirled in silence, weightless, and then dissolved entirely before they hit the floor. She stumbled back. No, no, no. That wasn't real, she whispered. That wasn't him. But part of her knew. It had been. Or at least, what was left of him. She turned in a slow circle, the flashlight beam dancing along the walls. Her breath trembled. Her ears rang with that final whistle of the lullaby, lingering like the aftertaste of a dream. Every shadow now seemed to flicker just a little too long, like something moving just out of sight. She caught her reflection in the shard of mirror near the sink. It didn't mimic her this time. It stood still, mouth smiling, eyes wide. And behind it, there were others. Dozens of faces. Blurred. Distant. Pressed against glass like children outside a candy store, all watching her. Their mouths moved in unison. She leaned forward, not wanting to understand, needing to. One by one, they come undone. Behind the wood, beneath the sun. She turned from the mirror with a choked sob. The wardrobe loomed behind her again. She hadn't heard it move. But it had. It was closer. Now only a few feet from the center of the room, when it had once sat quietly in the corner. Its legs scraped slightly on the floor, fresh gouges in the wood, as if it had walked. No, she muttered. No, no, no. She lunged toward the door, hand on the knob. Still locked. Still that void outside. But then she heard it again, the sound that curdled her blood. A faint knock. Not from the wardrobe. From beneath her. She dropped to her knees, pressed her ear to the floorboards. There it was, steady, rhythmic. Knocking. From far below. A place no basement had ever been built. Somewhere deep. And with each knock, she heard a voice growing louder. Multiplied. Layered. Male and female. Young and old. Whispers from a mass of unseen mouths. We remember you. Come see what you forgot. Clara pulled her head away from the floorboards, her face pale and clammy with sweat. Her chest rose and fell in sharp, shallow breaths. The whispers from beneath were still growing, not louder, but closer, as though the space between their world and hers was thinning. She stood on unsteady legs and took a shaky step back, eyes darting between the wardrobe and the broken mirror. Her reflection had vanished again. Now it was just her face staring back, drawn, afraid, and very much alone. The wardrobe let out a low creak. It hadn't opened. Not this time. But she could see a thin line of light beneath it again, deep red, like the glow of embers in a fire long gone cold. The same pulsing light from before. Clara had the terrible thought that maybe the wardrobe didn't just hold something inside it. Maybe it was a door to somewhere else. And now it was open. She took a step forward, and the floor groaned beneath her. She froze, staring down at the boards beneath her feet. They had begun to splinter. Thin cracks were forming in the grain, lines that widened with every breath she took. Then the boards beneath her heel gave a soft pop, like knuckles cracking. She stumbled back and dropped to her knees, shining the flashlight down. A narrow gap had opened. She pressed her fingers into the crack, hesitated, then pulled upward. The plank shifted. Not easily. Not like a loose board. It fought her. But finally, with a dry snap, it lifted, revealing a crawl space. Except it wasn't. It was a shaft, descending at a steep angle into darkness. No insulation. No pipes. Just smooth black walls and the faint echo of weeping. She dropped the phone inside. It landed with a hollow clack, illuminating for only a moment the shape of something at the bottom. A face upturned. Pale. Hollow-eyed. Mouth open wide. But not screaming. Smiling. Then the light flickered out. Clara staggered back from the opening, her limbs numb, her mouth dry with a scream she couldn't release. The phone, her only source of light, was gone, swallowed by the dark below. But that face, even now, it lingered behind her eyelids. Pale and waxy, like something that had never lived properly. Lips stretched in a smile far too wide. Teeth too small. Too many. Yet it hadn't lunged. It hadn't even moved. It had only waited, as if watching to see whether she would come down on her own. She grabbed the nearest thing she could, an old desk lamp, and yanked the cord. Nothing. The power was still out. The only light now came from the wardrobe, still barely ajar. That ember glow pulsed out from the gap beneath the doors like a dying heartbeat. With every beat, the floor beneath it shimmered, like heat haze over asphalt. She limped to the kitchenette, grabbed the drawer handle, and pulled it open too fast. Utensils clattered loudly, louder than they should have. Something behind the walls responded. A shuffling sound. Then another knock. But not from below this time. This time it came from inside the wardrobe again. 3 soft taps. Polite. Patient. Clara gripped a butter knife from the drawer, useless, but better than nothing, and turned to face it. "I know you're in there," she said, voice shaking. Another knock. Followed by a voice. This one was different, older, male. Croaking like dry wood. "Clara, you left the door open. That was very rude," she gasped. She hadn't told anyone her name. Not even the landlord when she signed the lease. He just looked it up on her application. "You're not real," she whispered. "We are," the voice said. "We just don't live here anymore." The doors creaked. Another inch. The light inside flared, just enough to show a sliver of what lay within. Steps, and possibly narrow, winding downward in a spiral that didn't belong in 3 dimensions. There was no visible bottom. And then, a hand appeared. Gray-skinned, long-fingered, resting gently on the doorframe from the inside. Not reaching, just waiting. The hand didn't move. It simply rested there, long fingers curled around the edge of the door as if claiming it, as if reminding her that this threshold no longer belonged to her. Clara's breath came shallow and rapid, the dull throb of her injured foot drowned out by the riot of fear surging in her chest. Her whole body itched with the urge to flee, but she didn't dare turn her back. The thing in the wardrobe wasn't chasing her. It was inviting her. "Why?" she whispered aloud. "Why me?" There was no answer. Just the steady, patient glow from within, and that unmoving hand, skin the color of weathered parchment, nails long, thick yellow. She lifted the butter knife. "Don't come out," she said, voice trembling. "I swear I'll." She stopped herself. "Do what, exactly?" The hand began to move. Slowly. Gently. It rose from the frame, and pointed. Clara flinched. "No, don't." But the finger didn't point at her. It pointed behind her. She turned. The closet was open again. She was sure she'd closed it. The raincoat had been moved, pushed fully aside. The scrawled message on the wall had changed once more. This time in red. Not chalk. Not charcoal. Something wet. Fresh. "We told you not to look. But you heard us. That's enough." She stumbled back and hit the wardrobe with her shoulder. The door responded with a creak, just enough to open another inch. Now she could see inside more clearly, the top few steps, the arch of impossible space beyond them, and further down, movement. Not one shape. Many. Dozens. All clustered just outside the reach of the ember glow, as if the light held them back. She could see faint outlines, arms, shoulders, heads tilted at wrong angles. Watching. Waiting. The hand withdrew slowly into the dark, and a new voice whispered from inside. "We've been patient. You opened the way. Now you must finish it." And with that, the apartment's front door unlocked itself. Click. Clara didn't move at first. She stared at the front door, now slightly ajar. A sliver of hallway light, dull and flickering, spilled in from the outside. The knob had turned itself. She heard the bolt release. The hinges shift. She hadn't touched it. She hadn't even looked at it. And yet, it had opened for her. The wardrobe sat behind her now, still glowing faintly, still exhaling warmth and whispers from beyond its threshold. She felt the heat licking at her spine like the breath of something waiting. And the closet? Still open. Still watching. The apartment no longer felt like hers. It didn't feel like a place at all. More like a throat. And now, after everything, it was letting her go. Or pretending to. Clara crept toward the door. Slowly. One step at a time. Her foot throbbed with every movement, but the pain kept her grounded, kept her tethered to the moment. The hallway stretched ahead, unchanged. The carpet runner was faded and frayed. The sconce above her flickered erratically, buzzing with old wiring. She could hear the elevator humming faintly down the hall. Normal. But she didn't trust it. Because something inside the wardrobe had pointed her to this door. And if it wanted her to leave, why? Her hand reached for the doorknob, but she paused just inches from it. From behind her, soft as breath, a voice spoke again. Feminine. Gentle. Wrong. "You'll take it with you, Clara. That's the only way out." She turned. Nothing there. The apartment sat still behind her, the broken mirror reflecting nothing now, the wardrobe doors slightly parted. From within came the sound of a breeze. Leaves rustling. Whispers in a language she didn't know. "You'll take it," the voice repeated. "Or we all stay." Clara's mouth went dry. She looked down. At her feet, just across the doorway, was a small wooden box. No larger than a shoebox. Plain. No hinges. No clasp. Just there. Waiting. It hadn't been there before. She didn't remember bringing it. She didn't own anything like it. She crouched slowly. The wood was warm beneath her fingers. And pulsing, like a heartbeat. Clara stared at the box. Its surface was smooth, almost too smooth. Not like the rough, splintering pine she was used to. This felt finished, polished, as if handled lovingly for years. But no part of it was familiar. And it was breathing. Each pulse beneath her fingers thumped softly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat deep within. Not hers. Something else's. She jerked her hand back, stumbling against the doorframe. "No," she whispered. "I'm not taking that. I didn't open anything. I didn't do anything. The wardrobe groaned behind her, its doors now open wider, casting the room in a deeper red glow. Shadows rippled across the floor like spilled oil. From within, voices rose in soft unison, whispering without urgency. Chanting. She couldn't make out the words, but they knew her. The cadence of the chant matched her breathing, then her heartbeat, until it felt like her own body was speaking with them. We see. We follow. We remember. We go. She shook her head violently, trying to break free of it, pressing her palms over her ears. No, she said louder. No! She turned to flee down the hallway, eyes fixed on the flickering sconce above the elevator. And stopped. The hallway had changed. Where once it stretched 10 or 12 feet to the elevator, it now went on. Far too long. Endless. The carpet no longer matched. The wallpaper had peeled into twisted shapes, water damaged and scorched in places. Doors lined either side, dozens of them, all shut. And from behind some of them, weeping, low, mournful, others whispered. One door was rattling softly. Another emitted a gurgling sound, like something bubbling up from a throat too narrow to hold it. Clara turned back to her apartment in terror. And now the box was open. She hadn't touched it. Inside, something glinted faintly in the red light. A small key, carved from bone, lying atop a folded scrap of paper, in her own handwriting. Use this when you're ready to remember. Clara stared at the folded paper inside the box. Her fingers hovered over it, unwilling to touch the bone key resting on top. Her mind couldn't explain how the handwriting matched hers exactly. Same slant, same slightly curled lowercase r, same habit of pressing hard on the downward strokes. But she'd never written that note. She'd never seen that key. Her voice cracked the silence. What the hell is happening to me? Behind her, the wardrobe exhaled again, sending a hot breeze across the room, thick with the scent of soil and iron. The red glow pulsed once more. She felt it on her skin, like the brush of something alive. Clara reached into the box and lifted the note, careful not to touch the key. It felt slightly warm, as though it had just been written. She unfolded it. More writing. Still hers. You forgot too much. You let it in. Now it won't go back unless you give it a name. Her mouth went dry. She reread it, again and again. The words didn't change. The ink didn't bleed. Give it a name? She glanced down at the key. It was small, almost delicate, but the tip was jagged, as though designed to fit only one specific lock. Not a door. Not a closet. It looked like it belonged inside a person. Or perhaps, inside the wardrobe. Another whisper slithered across the room. A different voice this time. Her voice. Not an echo. Not mimicry. Her. But distant. Warped, like recorded tape played backward. You left me down there. Don't you remember? No, Clara whispered. I don't remember anything like this. I don't know what any of this means. But even as she denied it, a sick, gnawing feeling began to rise in her chest. Because she did remember something. A fragment. A flash. She was younger, barefoot on the floor of a dark hallway, reaching toward the open doors of a wardrobe. And behind her, someone crying, calling her name. Clara, please, don't leave me here. Then the memory was gone. Just like that. The box snapped shut in her hands. The bone key vanished. And a new knock came, from inside her own closet. 3 slow raps. Then a voice. Familiar. Broken. Can I come out now? You promised you'd let me out. Clara stood paralyzed, her skin prickling with a cold that didn't touch the air. That voice, it wasn't just familiar. It was hers. But not like before, when the reflection had mimicked her. This was younger. Frightened. Real. A child's voice. Her own, from years ago. It came again, soft and plaintive behind the closet door. It's dark. I don't like it in here anymore. Her throat tightened. Who are you? Silence. Then, I'm the part you locked away. The floor beneath her pulsed. She took a step back from the closet, eyes darting to the wardrobe, still glowing, still humming like a furnace ready to roar. The doors remained open just wide enough to tempt her. The light inside had dimmed now, replaced by something deeper. Shadows shifted with purpose. Watching, the box in her hands felt heavier. Suddenly the door to the closet creaked open without her touch. Slowly, deliberately. Inside, nothing moved. Just her raincoat, the umbrella, the shelf above, tilted from age. And beneath them, a shadow, long and crouched. It stepped forward, and out came a little girl, no older than 6, barefoot, hair tangled, wearing a dress Clara vaguely remembered from a childhood photo. The girl looked up at her with wide eyes, and whispered, "You said you'd come back." Clara's lips parted. I don't remember this." "Yes, you do," the girl said. "You left me here. When the knocking started. When the steps came from the dark. You said you'd hide me. Just for a little while. Then you forgot. I didn't. You locked the door. And then you grew up." Clara stumbled back, heart hammering. "You're not me. You're not real." The girl tilted her head. Her smile was sad, ancient. "I'm what you gave it so it would let you go." And then she shivered, as though feeling the heat of the wardrobe against her skin. But now it wants more. Behind Clara, the wardrobe groaned open. The stairs inside pulsed with red light again. And somewhere far, far below, footsteps. Climbing. The sound of footsteps echoed from within the wardrobe, slow, deliberate, steady. Clara turned toward it, heart beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. Each step rising from the depths matched the rhythm of her pulse. The little girl, her younger self, stood silently in the closet doorway, eyes fixed on the glowing crack between the wardrobe doors. Her hands trembled at her sides. "You hear it too?" Clara asked. The girl nodded. "It's hungry." Clara felt bile rise in her throat. "Hungry for what?" The girl's voice was small. "For everything we forgot." Another step echoed from the depths. Then another. And with each one, the light from the wardrobe grew darker. Not dimmer, darker. As if the red glow were being swallowed from within, consumed by a shadow that didn't belong to anything shaped like a person. "You need to give it back," the girl said, stepping closer. "You took something when you left. It can't let go until it gets it back." "I didn't take anything," Clara snapped, her voice sharp with fear. "Yes, you did." The girl looked up at her with something between pity and sorrow. "You took me." Clara's throat tightened. She couldn't look away. Couldn't breathe. Memory tugged at the corners of her mind again, vague, dreamlike images of a storm, a game, a door that opened when it shouldn't have. A promise whispered in panic, "Just hide in here. I'll be back. I promise." She had locked the door. She had meant to return. But something came. And she had run. The footsteps were louder now. Closer. One final step landed like a drumbeat beneath the floor, and then silence. The wardrobe doors opened wider, until the spiral staircase inside was fully revealed. Something stood at the bottom of the stairs, just out of sight, watching, waiting. The little girl looked up at Clara once more. "You don't have to go alone this time." Clara turned to her. "What if I don't go at all?" The girl tilted her head. And her shadow, cast against the wall by nothing at all, stretched toward the wardrobe. The shadow of the little girl, Clara's younger self, stretched impossibly long across the floor, creeping toward the open wardrobe like spilled ink drawn by gravity. Clara watched it slither across the boards and felt an ache deep in her chest. It wasn't just dread now, it was recognition. Something buried in her bones. Something older than the memory of this place. She crouched to the child's level, trying to keep her voice steady. "If I go down, do I come back?" The girl's eyes shimmered with something that didn't quite belong to a child. Only if you bring what you left. Clara turned to look at the wardrobe. The red light inside had cooled to a smolder, soft and pulsing like breath through ember. The stairs were narrow, slick with something dark. They coiled downward, impossibly deep, fading into shadow. And in that darkness, Clara heard a new sound. A heartbeat. Not hers. Not the apartment's. The wardrobe's. It pulsed once, so deep it vibrated in her ribs. She rose slowly. The air was thick with heat and dust and memory. Her eyes caught movement in the mirror shards still clinging to the wall. It didn't show her, or the girl. It showed the staircase, far deeper than she could see with her eyes. And at the bottom, a door. Smooth, sealed, and carved with her name. She stepped forward. The little girl reached for her hand. Clara hesitated, then took it. It was warm, human. Together, they approached the wardrobe. The moment her foot touched the first step, the whispers returned, dozens of them. Hundreds. Layered over one another like leaves in wind. Clara, you left us. Come see. Come down. Come back. The spiral closed behind her like the inside of a shell. The apartment faded. Only the stairs remained. And the heat. It smelled like forgotten earth and old breath. The girl said nothing more. She just led. Down. The steps curved tighter as Clara and the girl descended. The light from the wardrobe faded behind them, replaced by a dull ambient glow that had no source. The air grew warmer, heavier, dense with moisture and the scent of old wood and older bones. Clara's injured foot throbbed with each step, but she didn't dare stop. The little girl held her hand firmly, small fingers warm and dry, impossibly steady. They passed walls that pulsed with faint movement, like muscles contracting slowly beneath skin. Every so often, Clara would catch the outline of a handprint in the stone, or the fading impression of a face. Not carved, pressed, as if someone had tried to escape through solid rock and failed. The silence wasn't quiet. It was full, alive. And within it, something moved far below. A soft shhhhhhh, like leaves stirring in the windless dark. Then a dry, wheezing sound, something between a sigh and a laugh. Clara stopped. How far down is this? The girl looked up at her. As far as you buried it. Clara shivered. They continued downward. The spiral tightened again. The stairs became uneven. Moss clung to the walls now. The light shifted, amber to red, red to gray, as though the space was breathing with them, adjusting to their presence. Then, around the next bend, the staircase ended. They stepped onto a landing. It wasn't made of stone but old, groaning wood. Floorboards warped with age stretched into a long corridor that shouldn't exist. The hallway was lined with doors. Dozens. All identical. Simple. Wooden. Each one had a brass plaque. And on each plaque, a name. Some faded beyond recognition. Others as sharp as fresh ink. Clara approached the nearest one. The name was simple. M. Salazar. Her breath caught. She stepped to the next. D. Keen. The next. E. Rios. She froze. That was her mother's name. She'd never lived here. Had she? She turned to the little girl, voice shaking. Where are we? The child's reply was quiet. Where they keep what you forget. Clara stood frozen before the door marked E. Rios. Her mother's name. The letters on the brass plaque gleamed as if freshly polished, untouched by the dust and decay that clung to the corridor. The handle below it was smooth, worn by fingers long gone. Her hand inched toward it. The girl tugged lightly at her other arm. You don't have to open them, she said softly. Not unless you're ready to see what they left. Clara turned to her. My mom, why is her name here? She never lived in that apartment. She didn't have to. The wardrobe reaches further than places. The hallway sighed around them, wood groaning beneath some ancient weight. It remembers pain, names, promises. Clara looked back at the line of doors. There were more now. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, new doors rising from the mist like gravestones surfacing from overgrown earth, each with a name, some familiar, some almost familiar, and some hers. Not once, but twice. She approached the next section of hallway, trembling. There, near the end, she found the two doors. The first, C. Rios. The second, Clara Rios. Identical in form, different in tone. The second plaque had deep grooves carved into it, as if someone had tried to scratch it out, but failed. The handle was red-stained, warm, beating faintly. The girl, the other Clara, released her hand. "I can't go any further." "Why not?" Clara asked, barely above a whisper. "Because this is where you stopped being me." Clara turned, staring into the child's face. She could see it now, the fear that had never left her. The moment she locked the door as a child, shut the memory away, and walked back into her life as if nothing had happened. "I didn't know," Clara whispered. "You did," the girl said, smiling sadly. "But forgetting is easier than forgiving." And with that, she stepped back into the shadow of the hallway, vanishing, leaving Clara alone before the door with her own name. And just behind it, a sound, breathing. Clara stood before the door. Clara Rios. Her name, etched deeply into the brass plaque as though burned in rather than engraved. The letters pulsed subtly, like veins beneath skin. Her fingers hovered above the handle, and the warmth radiating from it was unsettling. Familiar, almost like fever, like blood. Behind the door something moved. Slow, alive. And it was breathing. The cadence matched her own, as though something on the other side was listening closely, mirroring her, waiting for her to acknowledge it. She glanced back down the hallway. It was empty. The child version of herself was gone now, melted back into whatever place had held her since the day Clara had locked that memory away. The door before her groaned faintly, as if reacting to her thoughts. "Come in," it seemed to whisper. "You're the one who left." She touched the handle. It was soft. Not metal. Not wood. It gave slightly under her grip, like the texture of a worn leather glove stretched over something that still twitched beneath. She turned it. The latch clicked. The door swung open. Inside was a small room, square, no windows, lit by a single hanging bulb swaying gently in a draftless space. The walls were covered in scraps of paper, pinned or nailed with rusted tacks. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Drawings. Scribbles. Names. She stepped inside. The bulbs swung more violently now. On one wall, a child's crayon drawing showed a girl standing at the top of a staircase. Below her were black shapes, reaching out. The next, a stick figure, trapped in a wardrobe, smiling. The next, the word "remember" scrawled over and over until the paper tore through. She turned to the center of the room, and gasped. There, sitting in a small chair that looked like it had been carved from bone, was a woman. Pale, slouched, hair hanging in gray mats, face hidden in her hands. But Clara knew her instantly. She was looking at herself. Older, broken, waiting. Clara's breath caught as she stepped into the small room, the door creaking shut behind her with the slow finality of a sealed vault. The bulb above swayed faster now, casting harsh shadows across the drawings and papers pinned to the walls. The air was damp and bitter, like the inside of a box left to rot in the rain. The woman in the chair didn't move. She sat hunched, as though the weight of years pressed down on her spine. Her fingers, pale and claw-like, twitched against her cheekbones. Hair like wet moss clung to her scalp. "Hello?" Clara whispered. No reply. She stepped closer, and the light fell fully on the woman's face, revealing just enough to turn Clara's stomach. Because the woman's skin wasn't aged. It was peeled. Thin patches of flesh hung in curling strips, like pages being slowly torn from a book. Beneath the torn layers was shadow, deeper than skin, deeper than bone. The The woman trembled and spoke. "You took too long." Clara froze. "What?" The woman's hands dropped to her lap, and Clara saw her own face beneath, older, tired, hollow-eyed, mouth slack. It was her, or what would become her. "I waited here while you lived, while you forgot, while you laughed and locked doors and looked the other way. I kept watch. I kept it quiet." Clara shook her head. "This isn't real." The woman, her, lifted her eyes. They were empty. No whites. No irises. Only reflection. Like mirrors turned inward. "They gave you time. But time costs." Clara stepped back. The older version rose slowly from the chair, limbs creaking like old wood. Blood, thick, dark, dripped from her fingertips. "You left part of yourself here, and I had to grow it without you." Clara looked around, desperate for an exit, but the door had vanished. The walls were closing in. The drawings trembled, whispering. Behind her, the woman's breath came in rasping wheezes. Then calm. "You don't get to leave until you remember all of it." The floor beneath Clara buckled. She fell. Downward. Through the wooden planks. Through memory. Clara plummeted. Not through space, not through air, but through moments. The room dissolved above her, the warped floorboards stretching into thin strands of thought. She wasn't sure if she was falling or if the world was rushing past her, peeling itself apart to reveal the layers buried beneath her mind. There was no wind, no sound of motion, just the echo of names whispered around her, folding in on themselves like pages flipping too fast to read. "You said you'd come back. You locked the door. You looked too long. You forgot us." Then the flash. A child's bedroom. Her childhood bedroom. The cartoon wallpaper, the broken lamp shaped like a cloud, her stuffed rabbit with the missing eye. She saw herself, no more than 6 or 7, kneeling before her closet, whispering frantically to someone just out of sight. "I'll hide you here. Just until it stops." Another flash. Darkness. Thunder shaking the glass. Someone pounding at the front door. Her mother yelling. Her father, gone. She couldn't remember if he had ever been there. Another flash. She's holding the closet handle, locking it. She's crying. But she doesn't open it again. She never opens it again. The fall ends with a jolt. Clara lands hard, flat on her back, on cold, damp ground. She gasps, lungs straining, the scent of soil and wetwood heavy in her nostrils. Above her, blackness. Around her, graves. Crude markers, wooden, some metal, a few made of bone. All crooked. All etched with names. Her name appears on several. Some misspelled. Some unfinished. One burned entirely black. A tall figure stands between the markers, motionless. Its head tilts, but it has no face. It gestures to a nearby grave. The marker reads, "Clara Rios, the one who forgot." Her blood ran cold. "No," she whispered. "I'm not dead. I didn't forget. I didn't." But the grave before her cracked open, and inside it wasn't a body. It was a mirror. Her reflection blinked and whispered, "Come lie down. You've been here all along." Clara staggered to her feet, her breath rattling in her chest as she backed away from the open grave. The mirror inside gleamed faintly, though there was no light here, only the sickly gray glow of the fog that rolled across the ground like drifting ash. Her reflection stared back, but not as she was, as she would be, older, hollow-cheeked. The smile strained and twitching, red beneath her eyes, like she'd been crying for years without stopping. She wore the same clothes Clara had put on hours ago, had it only been hours? But they were rotted, damp with mold, torn as though something had clawed at her in the dark. "Lie down," the reflection whispered again, her voice both pleading and cruel. "You've always belonged here. It's where we wait. The ones who forget. The ones who leave others behind." "No," Clara muttered. "No, I didn't mean to. I didn't know." "You knew enough," the reflection snapped. Her smile widened, and the lips split slightly, bleeding from the corners. You heard the knocking. You locked the door. You felt me pulling at it, and you let go. Clara turned and ran. Not toward a path. There was no path. Just rows of graves stretching into mist, into forever. The ground beneath her shifted with every step, as though running across a sleeping beast's ribs. She passed markers with unfamiliar names that felt familiar. Past shadows hunched behind crooked stones, whispering in her voice, over and over. She forgot us. She forgot us. She forgot. Then the fog parted. A door stood in the clearing. Not a grave. Just a door, freestanding, no walls, no hinges. The wardrobe's door. Its wood pulsed faintly in time with her heart. Behind it, she heard footsteps again. Ascending. Slow. Inevitable. Clara placed her hand on the door's surface. It felt like touching memory. Warm. Sad. Alive. From behind it, something whispered. If you open it, you must take them back. Clara's palm rested against the door. It pulsed beneath her hand, slow and rhythmic, like a second heartbeat, one not her own. She stood in the clearing surrounded by graves and drifting fog, the strange air pressing down like a heavy memory long avoided. The whisper came again from the other side. If you open it, you must take them back. She closed her eyes, trembling. Her throat burned with all the words she hadn't spoken, all the years she'd spent trying not to remember, locking it all away. I didn't mean to forget them, she whispered. Intent doesn't undo absence. She clenched her jaw, pushed lightly. The door swung open. No hinges creaked. No gust of air rushed out. Just silence. And beyond it, a hallway. But not like the one in her apartment. This one was darker. The floor was uneven. The wallpaper peeled in slow, dripping curls. The air carried the scent of mildew, dust, and sorrow. She stepped through. The door closed behind her. There was no handle on this side. The hallway stretched forward and ended in a mirror. Large, ornate, built into the wall like a portrait frame. Its surface was black, not reflective, not glass. Black like oil. Like obsidian. Like eyes that didn't blink. As Clara drew closer, the surface shifted. And she saw them. All of them. The faces she'd forgotten. The people she'd passed by. Fragments of herself she'd buried. The girl in the closet. The woman in the chair. The ones who walked behind doors. The voices that had whispered her name. All waiting. All staring back. And in the center, herself. But not just one version. Hundreds. Thousands. Smiling. Crying. Screaming. One pounded against the glass, mouthing words she couldn't hear. Another clawed at the inside with blackened nails, skin peeling. And another stood perfectly still, staring. Holding a box. Her box. Clara whispered, "What do you want from me?" And every reflection spoke in unison. To be remembered. Clara stood before the mirror, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the army of selves staring back at her. Each one reflected a different version of her past, some familiar, some unrecognizable. Some wore grief like skin. Others stared hollow-eyed, lost in fog. And at the center of them all stood the version holding the box. The version who never left. This Clara, older, worn down by time and silence, lifted the box gently. Her lips moved, and though there was no sound, Clara understood her completely. You left me to carry all of this. Clara's throat closed around the lump that rose in it. Her knees went weak. She sank to the floor, hand against the cold wood beneath her. I didn't mean to, she said aloud. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just a child. I didn't mean to forget. But you did, the voices whispered from within the glass. Then the mirror began to ripple, like water. And one by one, the reflections began to step forward. Out. Through. The first to emerge was the little girl. Her eyes no longer wide with fear, but with understanding. She walked to Clara's side and sat beside her, hand on her knee. Then the older Clara, the one from the chair, stepped out next. Her body was bent, but her face had changed. She smiled, lips cracked, eyes soft. "I carried it for you," she said, her voice weak but calm. "But it was never mine alone." Clara sobbed. The grief came like a tidal wave, years of silence, of hidden dreams, of nights when she couldn't explain the hollow feeling in her chest no matter how full her life became. "You don't have to do this alone," said the girl. More reflections emerged, one by one, each one holding a memory she had buried, each one offering it back. And Clara took them, each one a cut, a burn, a weight she finally allowed herself to feel. Behind the mirror, the other voices hushed. The wardrobe was no longer glowing, just open, waiting. Clara stood and whispered, "I'm ready." The reflections gathered behind Clara like quiet sentinels. Her younger self, the older one from the chair, fragments of who she had been at different ages, each bearing the shape of a memory long buried. They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. Their presence alone anchored her. Clara turned toward the wardrobe at the end of the hallway. It stood open, no longer pulsing, no longer exhaling red light. Just waiting. The spiral staircase inside looked darker than before, but it didn't frighten her now. Not in the same way. Because now she understood. You didn't fall into the wardrobe. You descended. You brought something with you, and sometimes you left something behind. And sometimes you came to take it back. She stepped into the threshold. The moment her foot touched the top stair, the walls behind her folded in on themselves like paper curling in firelight. The reflections remained outside, watching silently, as she began the descent again. But it was different now. She was no longer running. She was returning. Each step downward hummed with a memory. The time she refused to answer the phone when her mother called. The time she walked past someone crying on the subway and pretended not to see. The time she sat awake at 3 a.m., certain she'd left something unfinished, unnamed, unwanted. The staircase deepened. The light grew warm again. Not red this time. Gold. It came not from the bottom, but from within her. The pain in her foot lessened. The throb in her chest eased. She reached the landing. It was no longer made of stone, but of worn floorboards. And ahead of her, at the far end, stood the door. The one carved with her name. Only this time, it was not cracked or burned. It was clean, polished, whole. And beneath her name was a second line, freshly etched. The one who remembered. She approached it, heart steady. She raised her hand to knock. Clara stood before the door that bore her name, no longer a tombstone, no longer a warning. It felt different now. It radiated stillness, not menace. The kind of stillness one finds in long-forgotten places, finally remembered. She didn't knock. Instead, she pressed her palm flat against the wood. It felt warm again, but no longer alive with hunger. Instead, it felt like memory, soft-edged, weathered, worn by time but not destroyed. With a soft click, the door eased open. She stepped inside. This room was not like the one before. There were no broken lights. No mirrors. No scraps of paper nailed in panic to the walls. Just a single chair and a wide wooden chest placed in the center of the room. She approached the chest, every step landing softly, as though the floor respected her presence now. The air was filled with the scent of cedar and old fabric. The chest bore no lock, no markings. But Clara knew what it was. She knelt in front of it and slowly lifted the lid. Inside, objects, each one small, ordinary, forgotten. A red marble, a silver button, a folded photograph of a stranger she almost recognized. A child's drawing of a sun with too many rays and a person labeled, me, with a smile that reached past the edge of the paper. And at the very bottom, a wooden toy rabbit, one ear missing. She gasped. She remembered it instantly. She had buried it in the backyard when she was 7, convinced it had eyes that followed her when no one else was looking. She never told anyone. She told herself it didn't matter. She forgot. Now it lay here, waiting. She lifted it gently. The missing ear had been reattached, crudely, but with care. A whisper passed through the room, not threatening this time. Just a statement. You brought it back. She stood slowly. The room dimmed, and the voice came again. Are you ready to leave? Clara clutched the rabbit to her chest. Yes. The moment Clara said the word, yes, the room responded. The air shifted, warmer now. Not the furnace heat of the wardrobe's hunger, nor the damp breath of buried secrets, but something gentler. Like early sunlight through curtains. Like the warmth of someone waiting up for you. The wooden chest sealed itself with a quiet thump. She turned around, still holding the rabbit in one hand. The door she'd entered through was gone. But in its place stood another, tall, pale, and simple. A door with no knob. Just a faint shimmer where fingers should push. Clara stepped forward and placed her hand flat against it. It pulsed once, and then opened. She squinted. The brightness was strange, not harsh, but clean. The air on the other side smelled like linen and wood polish and something sweet she couldn't name. She stepped through, and found herself standing in her apartment. Back. The real one. Or close enough. The wardrobe still sat in the corner, doors shut. The floor beneath it bore no red glow. The mirror was cracked, but not shattered. The closet door was slightly ajar. Everything was as it had been before. But different. The air no longer held that ancient tension. The shadows no longer whispered. The silence wasn't listening. Clara exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding since before the stairs. It came out like a tremor, like a prayer. She turned to the wardrobe. It sat still. Closed. But no longer ominous. More like a wound that had finally scabbed over. A reminder. The little wooden box sat on the floor just inside the door, right where she had first seen it. This time, it was empty. Except for a slip of paper. She picked it up. In her handwriting, one last message. You were never supposed to forget. But you came back. So you may leave. The wardrobe creaked softly, as if in agreement. Clara stood in the stillness of her apartment, the slip of paper trembling in her hand. Her eyes scanned the room, every corner, every shadow, every surface that had once seemed to breathe with unseen eyes. It was just a room now. She lowered herself onto the couch, the familiar creak of the cushion grounding her. Her foot ached from where glass had pierced it, but the bleeding had stopped. A faint, dried smear of red stained the wood beneath the coffee table, a physical echo of what had happened, of what had been faced. The rabbit sat in her lap. She turned it over gently. One ear still hung crooked, reattached with clumsy stitches, black thread looped through rough cloth. It looked fragile, precious, human. The object wasn't haunted. It wasn't cursed. It was just part of her. A piece she'd buried because she hadn't known how to carry it. But now she did. The apartment groaned softly as the AC kicked on. Light filtered through the window. Outside, someone was walking their dog. A car horn honked in the distance. The world hadn't ended. Not out there. But something had ended in here. Clara rose and walked to the wardrobe. The tall, hulking piece of furniture now seemed too large for the room in an entirely different way, like an elder whose purpose had been fulfilled. She reached out, fingers brushing the cool brass handles. They didn't twitch. They didn't resist. She opened the doors. The wardrobe was empty. No stairs. No light. Just wood. Dark, old, and still. At the very back, carved gently into the paneling, was a single word. Thank you? Clara closed the doors softly. She didn't lock them. She didn't need to. She turned away, walked to her desk, and took out a blank sheet of paper. For the first time in years, she began to write. Not to escape. Not to forget. But to remember. Clara sat at her small desk, the soft scrape of her pen the only sound in the apartment. She didn't write quickly. These words didn't spill from her the way panic or fear had. They came slowly, deliberately, like old friends at the door, uncertain if they were still welcome. She addressed the letter to the one I left behind, and she began. She wrote about that night, the storm, the fear, the sound in the closet. How she'd hidden the girl version of herself behind hanging coats, promising to come back. How she'd turned the key and walked away. How the fear had calcified into silence. How forgetting had grown like ivy across the walls of her life. She didn't ask for forgiveness. That wasn't what this letter was for. She simply remembered. Every sentence, every scratched out line, was an offering. Not to appease something monstrous, but to honor something human. By the time she finished, the sun was setting outside her window. Golden light filled the room, brushing the wardrobe's surface in amber. She folded the paper once, then again. She didn't seal it in an envelope, didn't address it. Instead, she walked across the room, opened the wardrobe one last time, and placed the folded letter gently on the floor inside. The wardrobe did not react. But as she closed the doors, a quiet warmth spilled through her chest, like a pressure she hadn't realized was there had finally been released. She stood back, staring at it. No voices. No breathing. Just wood. Heavy with memory. Clara turned off the lights and sat on the couch, rabbit still in her lap. Sleep came slowly. But when it came, it was quiet, uninterrupted. And the first dream she had in years was of the little girl, smiling, holding her hand, and walking beside her through a house with all its doors open. No alarms, no knocking, no wardrobe exhaling shadows. Just sunlight, clean and yellow, spilling across Clara's hardwood floor in long, lazy beams. She opened her eyes slowly. For a moment, she didn't remember. Not the stairs. Not the mirror. Not the girl in the closet. Then the ache in her foot reminded her, and the wooden rabbit on her nightstand confirmed it. Everything had happened. She sat up, blinking into the stillness. The apartment felt wider. Not physically, just lighter. The air no longer pressed against her chest. The silence no longer carried weight. For the first time in months, maybe years, Clara wasn't afraid to breathe deeply. She stood, padded barefoot to the kitchen, and turned on the coffee pot. A normal sound. A mundane sound. She laughed quietly at how beautiful it was. Her phone buzzed. For the first time in days, she checked it. 12 missed calls from her mother. A string of voicemails. She pressed play on the most recent one. Clara, honey, I don't know what's going on, but I had the strangest dream last night. I saw you, but you were little again. And you were crying. But then you weren't. Then you smiled. Like you used to? I don't know. Call me, okay? Clara held the phone to her chest. Tears welled, but they didn't spill. She made her coffee, sat by the window, watched the street come to life. A jogger with bright headphones, a man walking a stubborn pug, 2 kids racing scooters down the cracked sidewalk. Normal. Alive. The wardrobe sat silent in the corner, still closed, but no longer looming. Just there. A door that no longer needed to open. She sipped her coffee, and whispered into the quiet. I remember. And that was enough. The days passed quietly. Clara returned to her routines, grocery shopping, answering emails, tending to the small potted plant on her windowsill she'd once forgotten to water for weeks. The coffee pot worked every morning. Her reflection obeyed again. Nothing knocked. Nothing whispered. But something lingered. Not in a fearful way, but like a scent carried on old pages, faint and warm. She didn't try to explain it to anyone. There was nothing to explain. Not without sounding unwell. Not without unmaking the truth she now held gently in her chest. But one evening, just as the light began to dim into that soft gray blur between dusk and night, Clara was moving furniture to sweep beneath the couch. She wasn't thinking of the wardrobe. She wasn't thinking of the stairs. Until she moved the rug, and found the hatch. It hadn't been there before. She was sure of it. The floor beneath the rug had always been solid, sealed, unbroken. But now, a small square of wood, outlined cleanly, no dust in its grooves, rested at her feet. No handle. No lock. Just a tiny brass plate in the center, no larger than her thumb. She leaned closer. Etched into it, in letters barely visible unless the light hit them just right, was a single phrase. For when the memory returns. She sat beside it for a long time, heart neither racing nor calm. Just steady. She didn't try to open it. Not that night. Not the next. But some part of her knew. The story hadn't ended. It had only paused. And that beneath the floorboards, beneath the calm, beneath the comfort, something still waited. Not in anger. Not in hunger. But in silence. In memory. In patience. Clara didn't touch the hatch for 7 days. She swept around it. Mopped near it. Watched it from the corner of her eye like a childhood scar rediscovered in a mirror. It didn't speak. It didn't pulse. The brass plate remained cool, the engraving faint. For when the memory returns, she didn't dream of the stairs anymore. Instead, she dreamed of places with no doors at all. Wide fields. Endless sky. Warmth. But even in the clearest of these dreams, there was always a hum beneath the silence. Like a lullaby with no words. On the 8th day, Clara sat beside the hatch with a cup of tea and placed the wooden rabbit gently in her lap. She looked at the tiny seam in the floor. "What are you?" she asked softly. The hatch didn't reply. But her own voice did, from somewhere deep within. "A promise." She pressed her palm flat against the brass plate. It was warm now. She didn't flinch. She applied pressure, just enough. The hatch gave with a soft click and lifted itself the rest of the way, as if it had been waiting for permission. Beneath it, no stairs. No tunnel. No swirling descent. Just a hollow space. Inside, a box. Simple. Black. Smoother than the one she had seen before. Not polished, sealed. Clara reached down and pulled it free. It was heavier than it looked. She placed it gently on the floor before her. There was no latch. No keyhole. But the moment her fingers traced its edge, the lid lifted itself, slowly. Inside, a stack of letters. Some in her handwriting. Some not. Some decades old, yellowing at the edges. Others crisp and recent. Each envelope bore only a first name. Some she didn't recognize. Some made her breath catch. Elias. Daniela. Clara. Mother. And at the very bottom, an unopened envelope addressed simply to the next tenant. Clara stared at the letter addressed to the next tenant. Her fingers hovered above it, unsure whether to open it or leave it for whoever came after. But something about it felt personal, as though the title was not about who moved in next, but who chose to remain. She set it aside. Instead, she reached for the second to last envelope. Mother. It was sealed with a single piece of black thread, knotted tightly. She untied it gently, unfolding the paper inside. The handwriting wasn't hers. It was her mother's. Though shaky, it was unmistakable. Clara. I dreamed of the house again. The one with the big door in the hallway we never opened. You were always standing in front of it, whispering to someone I couldn't see. I thought it was just a dream, until I found the photo. The one you drew. The one I never remembered taking. You said something had followed you home. That it didn't speak, but it watched. I told you it was just a shadow. I was wrong. Clara felt the air thicken around her as she continued. I think I locked things away, too. Not like you did. But I closed doors in my mind because I thought that's what parents do. I should have listened better. I hope this finds you. If not now, then someday. Love. Clara folded the letter with trembling fingers. She held it to her chest and closed her eyes. How many generations had kept the wardrobe closed? How many had opened it? Forgotten it? How many had written letters and never mailed them, never spoken the words aloud. She turned to the other envelopes. Some she opened slowly, one at a time. Others she tucked aside, unopened, unread. Not because she didn't care, because she wasn't ready. And then finally, only one envelope remained. To the next tenant. She held it in both hands. The seal broke at her touch. Inside, a short note, written in her own hand. If you're reading this, you heard it too. The knocking. The breathing. The silence that isn't empty. Don't be afraid. Remember what I did not. You're not alone. Clara sat with the letter resting in her lap. You're not alone. The words echoed in her chest like the soft tolling of a far-off bell. Gentle. True. But not simple. They were a reminder, a reassurance that carried both warmth and warning. The box sat open beside her, its contents still and silent. Yet the air in the apartment had changed. Not in the way it had before, when shadows whispered and the walls pressed in. This was different. A kind of attention. As if the place itself was listening. She looked around her apartment, and for the first time, she noticed things she hadn't really seen in years. The coffee cup with the hairline cracked near the handle. The painting above the bookshelf that had always hung slightly crooked, no matter how many times she adjusted it. The scuff on the wall from moving in. The indentation on the floor where the wardrobe's clawed feet sat, like bruises left on the wood. She was seeing everything. Not as threats. Not as stories to avoid. But as reminders. Each imperfection was a history. Each silence was space waiting to be filled, not with fear, but with memory. She gathered the letters back into the box, except the last one. That one she left on her desk. Unfolded. Plain. Waiting. She did not close the hatch. She did not move the wardrobe. She let it all remain, exactly as it was. That night, as she turned off the lights and slipped into bed, the apartment creaked softly in the way all old places do. But it didn't groan. It didn't breathe. It rested. Clara pulled the blanket to her chin, the stuffed rabbit lying beside her. And as her eyes closed, she heard it again, not with fear this time, but with understanding. A soft knock. From within. Not the wardrobe. Not the closet. But herself. Memory. Knocking to be let back in. The knock echoed inside her, not as sound, but sensation. Like the chill of recognition. Like the moment you remember a name you'd forgotten for years. And it brings a warmth behind the eyes and a sting behind the ribs. Clara didn't flinch. She simply lay still in the dark, eyes half open, the apartment around her bathed in pale moonlight. The wardrobe stood quiet. The hatch beneath the floor rested flat. But something inside her stirred. It wasn't fear. It was invitation. She turned to face the ceiling. "I hear you," she whispered. The knock returned. Gentler now. A response. She saw, in her mind, the stairwell again. But not how it had once been, twisting and hungry. This time it was calm. Straight. Lined with frames on the walls, like a gallery of her life. Each step was a year. Each landing a moment. And in every picture, her. Sometimes smiling. Sometimes crying. Always growing. She saw the first day she came to the apartment, suitcase in hand, arms sore from moving, hope and uncertainty sharing space in her chest. She saw the first time she stood in front of the wardrobe, unaware. She saw herself, younger still, turning the lock on that closet and whispering, "Just wait here. I'll come back." She saw her reflection wave, and then fade. She rolled to her side, eyes falling on the open letter she had left on her desk. "You're not alone." Clara closed her eyes. And this time, she didn't dream of staircases. She dreamed of rooms filled with light. Of voices telling their truths. Of memories returned to their rightful places. Of a child, sitting by a window, drawing in crayon. And leaving the door beside her wide open. The next morning arrived with gold spilling across the floorboards. Clara woke slowly, stretching her limbs beneath the blanket like someone easing into their body after years of absence. The air in the room was warm, The scent of sunlight on dust, books on a shelf, tea before it steeps. She sat up and listened. The wardrobe was quiet. No heartbeat. No breath. Just the groan of old wood contracting in the morning light. She stood and walked barefoot across the floor. The rabbit lay where she left it on the nightstand, one crooked ear turned toward the window like it had been listening too. She smiled and touched its frayed stitches. Then she turned to the hatch. Still flush with the floor. Still subtle, as if it might vanish again if not remembered. But she remembered. She always would now. She sat beside it, fingers tracing the grain of the wood. "I think," she said aloud, "you're not here to trap people." She wasn't sure of who she was speaking to. The house? Herself? The memory? But to give them a place to put the things they can't carry yet. The hatch didn't answer. But she didn't expect it to. She opened the black box once more. Not out of fear this time, or duty, but with the reverence one gives to old photographs, to unfinished letters. Each name on each envelope now felt sacred. She ran her fingers across the stack. So many tenants, so many stories, so many who had come before, and so many who might come after. Clara reached for a fresh envelope, blank. She uncapped her pen. She began to write. Not another warning, not another explanation, but a welcome. If you're reading this, then you felt it too. It's okay. You're not broken. You're not cursed. You're just carrying more than one life. Let it speak to you. She paused, then added, "Leave the door open. It's better that way." Clara folded the letter carefully, pressing the crease flat with her thumb. There was no need to seal it. Whoever came next would know it was for them. The words were already waiting in the air, quiet and steady, like a held breath before a song. She placed the envelope back in the black box, now nestled among the others, part of a collection not of fear, but of survival, of understanding. She closed the box. The brass plate on the hatch shimmered again in the morning light, the engraving almost winking at her. For when the memory returns, she let it stay open now. A crack between stories. A soft-spoken threshold. Clara stood and stretched, the familiar pop of her spine grounding her in the room. The ordinary sounds of the city filtered through her window, distant traffic, a neighbor's laugh, a barking dog somewhere far below. Life, continuing. Not despite what she'd seen, but because of it. She went to the wardrobe and opened its doors. Still empty. Still still. But inside, on the back panel, beneath the etched word, "Thank you," a new line had appeared. She hadn't written it. It wasn't carved. It was stitched, like thread drawn through memory. 3 simple words. "You stayed awake." Clara reached forward, touched the words lightly. A smile crept across her lips. Not sad. Not broken. Whole. She stepped back, closed the wardrobe gently, and turned to the window. Outside, clouds passed lazily across the sky. The sun filtered through them, painting her floor in shifting light. The world no longer pressed on her. It stood beside her, waiting, listening, and for the first time, she understood. The house had never needed to be escaped. It had only needed to be heard. Clara left the wardrobe doors open after that day. Not because she expected anything to return from within, but because she had learned the truth: closed doors don't protect you. They only hold the weight of what you refuse to carry. And this weight, she could carry now. The apartment became quiet in a new way. Not the hush of dread, but the peace of still water. The kind of quiet where you could hear yourself breathe, where memory could stretch its limbs and settle in beside you, unafraid. She rearranged her furniture, put the coffee table closer to the window so the light would hit it in the morning. She bought a new throw blanket. She repotted the wilting fern she'd once almost tossed out. The wardrobe stayed where it was. Heavy. Honest. A thing of presence. Occasionally, she would hear faint sounds from beneath the floor, shifts, creaks, breath-like murmurs. But they no longer filled her with dread. Instead, they reminded her that nothing was ever truly gone. that everything forgotten was still there, beneath the surface, waiting for the day someone dared to remember it. One afternoon, she returned from the bookstore with a small brass key she hadn't meant to buy. It was part of a trinket collection, old, mismatched keys with no known purpose. But when she held this one in her palm, it felt warm, familiar. She brought it home and placed it on the desk beside the rabbit. It didn't unlock anything, but it belonged. That night, as she sat with a cup of tea, the breeze stirred the curtains. It moved across the floorboards like a sigh of old paper. She thought she heard a knock. Faint. Inside her again. She didn't flinch. She whispered, "I hear you. I'm still here." And the knock faded, not into silence, but into rest. Time moved differently now. Not slower, not faster. Just present. Clara began to notice things again. The rhythm of rain on the window, the way dust danced in the sunbeams, the quiet kindness of everyday routine. The silence in the apartment had stopped feeling hollow. It felt inhabited, not haunted, held. She no longer feared the dreams. When they came, they brought scenes of light, of doors open and closing gently behind her. Sometimes she walked the halls again, not in terror, but in reflection. The faces in the mirror no longer screamed or smiled unnaturally. They just watched, and she nodded at them. Sometimes she left a note in the box under the hatch. Not always addressed. Not always long. Just a line or two. One read, "I remember you. I hope you remember me." Another, "It doesn't end at the bottom of the stairs. It begins again." She'd begun to keep a journal, something she hadn't done since childhood. Not out of discipline or therapy, but because there was now space in her mind to write. The words had room to land. She kept the rabbit on her bookshelf, propped between two worn novels. Occasionally, she would turn its head slightly to face the window. It felt right that it should watch the world outside now. And the wardrobe? Still open. Still empty. But never unimportant. One evening, as she sat watching dusk roll in over the rooftops, she spoke aloud. "I know now that remembering doesn't mean reliving. It means returning with kindness, even to the places that hurt." There was no reply, but the wood of the wardrobe creaked softly, almost like a sigh, almost like it agreed. Clara found herself writing more often, not just in the journal, but on loose scraps of paper, the backs of receipts, old library checkout slips. The words came quietly, like long-forgotten guests knocking softly on the inside of her ribcage. They weren't confessions. They weren't warnings. They were remembrances. Small notes that seemed to have been waiting for her to notice them all along. "You were afraid. It's okay. So was I. It's not too late to unlock a door. The echo isn't a ghost. It's you calling back." She folded each message and slid them into the black box beneath the floor. She no longer counted them. It wasn't about volume. It was about honoring what had once been left unsaid. One afternoon, she opened the hatch and found something unexpected, a folded note placed by someone else. The handwriting was neat, unfamiliar, but the message was simple. "Thank you for not closing the door." Clara sat back on her heels, blinking. A weight lifted in her chest, not heavy, just deep. The kind of weight that comes with knowing something has been passed on. Continued. Received. She looked around the apartment. The light hit differently now. There was no red glow, no breathing wood, just a sense of continuity. As though the walls were not confining her, but carrying her, and all those who had come before. That night, she lit a candle and placed it by the wardrobe. Not out of superstition, out of gratitude. She whispered, "For the ones who stayed, for the ones who returned, for the ones still walking the stairs." And when she turned to go to bed, the wardrobe creaked once. Not open, not closed, just present, listening. The candle by the wardrobe burned low into the night. Clara sat beside it, legs folded, her back against the cool wall. The flickering light painted long shadows across the room, shadows that no longer frightened her. They were simply echoes now, gentle ripples on the surface of time. She had not opened the box in days. She didn't need to. It was there for her, for others, for whoever came next. And they would come. She knew that now. Memory didn't choose just one person. It moved. It lived. It passed from hand to hand, door to door, tenant to tenant. She was simply one part of it. And she had done her part. A letter appeared under the wardrobe one morning. There was no knock. No whisper. Just a folded page resting against the wood. She opened it slowly, heart steady. I think I found the staircase. Not yours. Mine. I didn't know what I was looking at until I read your letter. I don't think I'm ready to go down yet. But I'm not afraid to wait by the door. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. Clara placed the letter inside the black box and lit another candle. That night, she sat in the glow again, and whispered a single line into the stillness. You'll know when it's time. She dreamed of her apartment filled with people. Not crowded. Just full. Different versions of herself. Others she didn't know, but somehow recognized. Some stood beside the wardrobe. Others walked the hallway. One swept the floor, humming a lullaby without words. One opened a door and stepped into light. When Clara awoke, the candle had burned down to nothing. But the room was brighter than before. The wardrobe remained. Open. Still. Home. The days turned to weeks. Clara began to notice that time didn't pass through the apartment anymore. It wove itself into it. Like the lines in the wood of the floor, like the fibers of the rug beneath her feet, like the faint scent of candle wax soaked into the corners of the room. Memory wasn't something she kept hidden anymore. It lived in the open now. Visible. Touchable. There were traces of it everywhere. A note pinned to the corkboard that simply read, "Let them knock." A sketch of the wardrobe, drawn in the soft hand of someone unsure but curious. A crayon left near the baseboard, as if a small hand had been drawing messages to the floor. Each one was part of the story. Each one made the silence more whole. One morning, Clara rose to find the wardrobe's doors slightly wider. She paused, hand on her tea mug, unsure if she'd left it that way. Inside, still empty. But the wood at the back panel had changed. What was once just a single-stitched message, "You stayed awake," had now grown. Small threads of gold had spread from it. They formed no words. Not yet. But they moved with intention. Like vines slowly spelling a truth that hadn't finished growing. She touched the threads gently. They were warm. Clara smiled. Not everything needed to be read all at once. She turned to the desk, pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, and wrote the name of the person she hadn't heard from in years. A friend. A memory she had let drift too far. She didn't know what to say yet, but she knew how to start. "I remembered something. I think you were part of it." Outside, clouds moved slowly. The wardrobe stood open behind her, and on the floor near the hatch, a new note appeared. And signed, "I think I'm ready." Clara found the note on a Sunday morning, the air still cool with sleep and quiet. "I think I'm ready." There was no envelope, no handwriting she recognized. The ink was slightly smudged, as though it had been written in nervous hands. It wasn't left with ceremony, just placed gently on the floor beside the hatch. It felt like a breath drawn before a first step. She sat beside the note for a long while, not reading it again, just being near it. And then, almost without thinking, she opened the black box and placed the message inside, on top, where it would be the first thing someone else might find. That night, as dusk crept into the apartment, Clara made tea and left an extra cup on the small table beside the wardrobe. It was a quiet invitation. No one came. But the gesture was enough. She began keeping a lamp on near the wardrobe, not because she feared the dark, but because it reminded her of a lighthouse. A place that stays lit in case someone else needs help finding the shore. And soon, the messages began to appear more often. One every few days. sometimes only a sentence. It tried to speak, and I listened. I saw her in the mirror again. This time she smiled. The stairs weren't as steep as I thought. I left a letter for the one who's still afraid. Each one a thread. Each one proof that someone else had begun to open the door, or descend, or sit in stillness beside memory, and stay. Clara didn't try to reach them. That wasn't her role anymore. She had become something else. Not a tenant. Not a prisoner. Not even a guide. She had become what the wardrobe had once been. A door. A place. A welcome. The morning light fell differently now. It didn't stream. It settled, like memory on skin, like breath on glass. Clara no longer noticed the exact moment the sun rose or set. It just moved, and she moved with it. The apartment was full of light and shadow, warmth and silence. It had changed. She had changed. She no longer checked the wardrobe each morning. She didn't need to. It was always open, always quiet. Not waiting, just there, like a well that no longer needed to be drawn from every day, only honored. The hatch remained uncovered. Sometimes, when the air was very still, she thought she heard paper shifting inside. She never rushed to open it. She knew better now. The stories would wait until someone was ready to listen. She still wrote letters. Fewer now. Shorter. Sometimes only a phrase. You are not the first, and you won't be the last. Don't run. Sit with it. What you buried was never dead. Forgiveness is remembering with your hand open. One afternoon, a new note appeared beside the wardrobe. It wasn't addressed to her, but she read it anyway. Thank you for leaving the door open. I left mine open too. She smiled, folded the note, placed it carefully in the box, and then she stood one last time before the wardrobe. The golden threads inside had finished their weaving. The message on the wood was complete now. It read, "You are the story someone else needs." Clara touched the words, closed the doors, not in fear, in peace. Then she packed a bag. Nothing large, just what she needed. And she left a final letter on the table. It wasn't long, just a single line. If you hear it, open it. She turned off the lights, stepped into the hallway, and walked forward, light trailing behind her.